It's nice to see that we got some of the group back.
Exactly. It's taken us a while.
That is cool. And so you all have been in satsang quite a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we did actually, didn't we? It became our Wednesday night treat.
That's cool. We did have a topic for tonight. Shane is watching. The nature of fear. But, it's like everything else. But is there anything that you guys wanted to get into or felt like was burning, or any existential crisis going on?
I went through a lot of fear.
Huh?
I went through a lot of fear.
And you came out the other side?
I think I came out the other side. A lot of from my previous life.
Yeah.
I think it taught us a lot. Taught us a lot of things.
The fear? Yeah.
And that is one of my determination. From now on, I don't want to act anything out of fear. It's very hard. But
Yeah.
that is like really, I'm determined to do that.
Yeah. It's kind of like suffering teaches you that suffering's not necessary, but yet it's required. And fear's kind of the same thing. It's like, to be in this human experience, we're going to have this play of fear. And it's so funny to look at our personal experiences of fear because, my God, we've been through so many circumstances, so many things that have been fearful, and we always come out the other side. We always look back and say, oh my goodness, I didn't have to be afraid. Which, most importantly, I think the invitation is to recognize that sweet innocence. Much like a child that imagines monsters in the closet, it's like, it's okay. I get it. And I see that life in the way that it holds space for being human. There's such a gentle allowing for us to be afraid, in the same way that a loving parent might allow their child to be afraid. In that illustration, the parent knows that when the child comes crying about monsters in the closet, the parent knows there isn't really monsters in the closet. And so the parent's not concerned. There's just this gentle innocence of like, oh my God, you're so cute. Yes, we're doing this again. There's monsters.
Yeah. It's funny because sometimes the child doesn't even realise that it's not true. I've got a daughter, she's 7, and she watched Harry Potter, and that was probably a mistake because now she's really scared of the Dementors.
Right.
And she actually knows that Dementors are not real,
Yeah.
but when she wakes up at night and she's on her own, she has to come and find me because of the Dementors.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so you can think it's real.
Yeah, and it becomes real in that way. It's like, if you believe it, your whole reality shapes into that fear.
But she sort of knows that it's not real, but yet, in that moment, she's scared of it.
Yeah.
So it's,
Sometimes the fears are real.
yeah.
Sometimes they are.
What's the difference?
Imagine.
What would be a real fear?
Like, you lose your life, whatever you have,
Mm-hmm.
and everything, material, family, friends, and at a point could be your life. And that's what I like to hear about the death. It's not real, but it's difficult.
It is. It seems real.
Now past, everything has passed, but still I remember very clearly all the fear that I had.
Yeah. Well, let's look at, because you touched on something that I think is important. What I hear you saying is that fear somehow or another is a fear of loss.
Yeah.
You're afraid of losing something that you think you have, which is a very interesting inquiry. Who's to say it's yours? Like your family, other people. We say we fear losing them as if they're ours. A job, a relationship, even your own life. Isn't it interesting? You as a human being, you're given a breath. It's given to you. All of your organs function. You grow. You don't do any of that. All of it's given to you. And it's interesting that we could say, my life, like you're doing something. But yet it's all of life doing it through you. And you see how we try and control that? We try and take ownership of it. Very similar in the play of relationship. It's like you find yourself in a new relationship dynamic, and eventually something in you starts to take ownership, claim it as your own. And as soon as you start doing that, you fear losing it. Which is the funny thing about relationships, because when they first happen, there's no claiming. It's just the enjoyment. And it's much more fun.
Yeah.
But
you lose that freedom, don't you?
yeah, as soon as you think it's yours. And so this points to, it may be somewhat abstract, but the real freedom from fear is to see that you have nothing to lose. And you can notice everything that comes up that in a way wants to argue with that. That says, no, but this is mine, and this is mine, and this is mine. Is it really? And in that song before at House of Zen, we talked a lot about the play of identifying. We identify with things that we say are ours. And then we don't fear losing that thing. We fear losing the identification. Without this, I don't know who I am. And so I fear not knowing who I am. Do you see that underneath it? Underneath the loss of these things? We could say, I'm afraid of losing this. Is it that? Or are you afraid of not knowing who you are? You see, the mind is very, very sneaky. It's like if you examine the 10,000 different fears, you see that it's actually one fear, expressed 10,000 different ways. We can say, I'm afraid of losing a job, I'm afraid of losing a relationship, I'm afraid of dying. All of these different expressions of fear. In the same way, every disturbance that you might have, agitation, stress, sadness, that all comes from fear. And yet the mind tells so many stories that says, no, it's not that, it's this and this and this and this and this. Which, as far as I'm concerned, is what makes understanding this human experience very difficult, is because we start believing all of the different stories about fear.
Yeah, I think the media has got a huge amount to do with it as well. You know, sometimes I regret listening to the news and, you know, I'm like, oh, why have I done that? You know, the other morning I had the most ridiculous anxiety, which only lasted for about 3 minutes.
Yeah.
But because of media coverage about a school bus crashing,
Yeah.
I was going on a school trip.
Right.
And I was like, and my partner was going on the same school trip, and I was like, what if we're both in a bus accident like that other bus?
Yeah.
Who's going to look after our daughter? You know, this.
Yeah.
And then it was like, and it does, it brainwashes you, doesn't
Yeah.
it? Particularly when there's a big visualization.
And it just goes on and on and on and on and on. I call that the infinite worlds of worry. It's like you're sitting at home and you can find 100 things in your home to worry about. Then you go outside, find 100 things to worry about in your city or in your country or in your world, in the galaxy. You see this? There's always something to worry about. And if you take the time to investigate all of that worry, especially in sort of a satsang sort of way, you find out it's nonsense. It's like, actually, that's nothing.
Yeah.
There really isn't anything to worry about. And so it's interesting that we continue to find ourselves in this play of following those stories. Almost as if there's it's not a demand, but it's a very direct invitation to stop. Whenever it arises, just stop. And that naturally comes with one's ability to discern the difference between what's true and what's not. There's a classic story in the Bible that speaks to this with Jesus in the desert, and the devil comes and tells him all sorts of things. And he's like, no, it's not true. It's not true. Like he doesn't even entertain. And this, all of these things that are pointed to, they're all predicated on one discovery. And that is the discovery of what you really are. And not even so much in a esoteric sort of way, but just in a very real practical way that, oh, I'm not that, and I'm not that, and I'm not that. Because that's what the mind spends so much time worrying about and thinking about. Do you see how it's worrying about you as a something? Your identity over here and over here and over here. And the more clearly you see that it's not what you are, there's no interest in thinking about it.
I think it ties into that talk that we often have about responsibility.
Yeah, you like that one.
Yeah, because I just wish I could. Unfortunately, I don't know whether it's just conditioning of the way that I've been brought up and the experiences that I have. I give myself titles, and on the grave, I won't have a gravestone, but if there was one, it would be something to do with being a daughter, a mother, a friend, a sister, and things like that. So it's like that's how I perceive myself.
Yeah.
It's all based on responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's something that I wish I didn't feel.
Well, you don't like the alternative.
I'm scared of the alternative.
Exactly. That's
actually terrifying.
Exactly. You see, and that's so brilliant to discover, because in a way, fear holds you hostage. It's like the play of responsibility, that image. If you don't do this, then you'll lose this. Which is, you'll go to this space of unknown. You'll go to this space of not having anything to hold on to. And so we keep playing the game. And I'll tell you, you play that game until you become absolutely and utterly exhausted. Yeah. And then you find some sort of relief in spiritual things, but then you go back to it. And it's all perfectly fine. But here's kind of what's interesting is that we're terrified of letting go, but it's actually what you want most. And this is the thing about the core of our humanness, is that the one thing that we crave, we're terrified of. And it can be illustrated in lots of ways. It's like the human being says, I want love. Do you realize that if you actually got unconditional love, you'd stop trying to change. You would no longer use guilt as a weapon towards yourself. All of that comes because we fear losing love. To actually discover the realness of love, you find that there's nowhere to go. You see, this is the motivation of seeking in the human being. It's constantly looking for something. Looking. That's all looking for love in some way. Did you see, if you actually found it, then you'd stop looking. The human being finds themselves through looking, through seeking. And this is the thing about the spiritual quest. Most people looking for the truth don't really want to find it. They just want to keep looking. Because it gives them something to do. And that's all totally fine. It's just at some point we will exhaust ourselves. And so enjoy the looking while you can. It's like something inside says, oh, I really just want to relax. But I'm afraid to just relax. It's like I had that moment earlier today. Around 4 o'clock, I was working, and something inside of me just kind of screamed and says, I don't want to work anymore. Then I lay down on this couch, and I was like, I'm just going to lay here. And I saw all the thoughts arise, but what about this, and what about this, and what about this? Like all of these things. Like, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to relax. And here I am, I made it. But it's funny watching the mind threaten you.
I think if I'd have gone to lay down this afternoon, there'd have been more consequences. So I was supposed to be teaching a class of children, so had I just thought I fancy a little lie down, everybody would be going, where is she?
You could lay down in the classroom.
Under the table.
Could have probably gone to a quiet place where nobody could find me, lay down, walk down to the beach.
Let's examine this fear and to see how the only thing you are afraid of is the only thing you want. In this movement of being a human being, it's like we're afraid of disappearing. You could also say dying. But yet, in our moments of pain and struggle, something says, I wish I could just disappear. In all of our beautiful moments of joy, of creativity, do you notice that there's something in you that has disappeared? In contrast, you can see that if you're ever suffering, you're thinking about who you are. And in your moments of joy, you're not thinking about who you are. It's like something says, I wish I could just disappear and let life move me. I wish I could just get out of the way. And in the sincerity of that desire, the mind says, no, you have to be in the way. Or else you will lose. And there's so many ways you could say what it is, but you know what it is? It's like what you will lose is what you have in the world. What you will lose in the world is acceptance, love, approval. And seeing, this is what fear does. To me, this is the most insane thing, and I've said this 1,000 times, but we want to be accepted in the world by other people. And the only way we can do that is by rejecting ourselves. In order to move to get someone's approval, you can no longer be what you are. You can no longer be natural. You see, this is an epic disaster. Because in one way, the inside of what we are screams out and says, I want to be accepted. I want to be loved. And I hope you see in some way or another that that's impossible in the world. And if you can really see that, then something lets go of the world. And just notice that subtle movement in the way that we move that's looking for something in the world that you can actually only give to yourself. Looking to family, looking to a partner, looking to a job. The misunderstanding is that somebody else has something that you need. Do you see that if somebody else has something that you need, you become a prisoner? If the world has something that you need, you become a prisoner to the world. This is how governments control people. To create an environment where you need them. Almost in the same way that the media convinces you that you need the media to protect you. You see, and to slowly release the world, it's like bowing and saying thank you, but no thank you. You become much more available to see what you actually are. Because I'm telling you, to see what you are, you'll laugh at the world. Not in any sort of negative way, but in the most loving way. anything that you might fear today will become hilarious tomorrow. Like imagine this in a relationship dynamic where yesterday your frame of mind was, oh my goodness, I need this person to love me. I need this person to approve of me. And then you see how impossible that is. It's like, actually, no, I don't. That's kind of silly. It's like, I don't need that at all. Do you see? You kind of laugh. You laugh at that movement of yesterday that was so afraid of losing this person to the point where you couldn't even relax. You couldn't be still. You always had to try and be what they wanted you to be in order to not lose their love. And the more it becomes clarified that that's just not true, I don't need that. I was watching I'm helping a friend edit some video. It's a dear friend of mine in Hawaii who also teaches like the things that I teach. And she was talking about a moment when the IRS came to talk to her about her business and, the tax people. And she had this thought, oh my God, I might go to jail. She thought that was a real possibility. And this IRS agent was going to be there in like 10 minutes. And she was starting to freak out. I might go to jail. And so in her own way, she kind of prayed for help. And the message she got in some way or another was, wherever you go, you're awesome. So even if you go to jail, you'll be awesome. And she just started busting up laughing. She's like, you know what? That's right. It doesn't matter where I am. I'm awesome. I'm the one that enjoys life. I can enjoy that too. And so she completely just dropped the fear that if this is going to be, then this is going to be. There's nothing I can do about it. In either way, I can enjoy what I am, no matter the condition. And it ended up just working out perfectly, naturally, just in a very miraculous way. Nothing happened. But yeah, the IRS lady eventually says, oh, actually, we made a mistake here. There's nothing going on here at all. Which isn't what really happened, but it was more of like a play of energy. Because she wasn't afraid, and she was just open and honest, like nothing to hide. Do you see the energy play? Now imagine you're terrified, and somebody like that comes over. Do you see how there's a different energy now? You pick up on that energy. This is why when you move in a space of openness, like an openness for anything to happen, whether it's death, whether it's dying, whether it's sickness, whether it's transformations and transitions, like a complete openness for anything to happen, that's love. And so you can kind of playfully ask yourself, what am I not okay with happening? and you can see what you're holding on to. And you will see how that's a big source of restriction in your life. Whenever I speak with couples, it's always so fascinating because most of the time, if there's conflict, there's the assumption that they have to be together. Like, you have to be together. Right. And you see that's very fearful. And you can't resolve anything in fear. It becomes a game of manipulating the other person. But the most liberating thing in relationship is to see, holy shit, we don't have to be together. We don't. That's just an idea, a fearful idea.
I think it's also acceptance.
Yeah.
It's just kind of like, okay, I accept the life that I've chosen.
Right.
Presently.
Right.
start thinking about options and things like that.
Yeah.
That's a dangerous road to go down.
Oh, is it? That's interesting. That's interesting.
But isn't it that is also fear?
Yeah, it is, very much.
It's that windy road
It is.
Yeah.
on a cliff edge.
You didn't want to
Yeah.
go, you didn't want to go that direction, so we just
You
focus.
go for the nice.
You already know.
The nice.
And the question is how's it going? Because if it's going, then wonderful. But if it's not, then we can kind of see why. Because I'm withholding sincerity. I'm not allowing me to be me. Which is almost like saying, I'm in life not allowed to be what I am. That's prison.
But we also change through time.
Yeah. Can you flow with that change? See, that's the thing. It's like you thought you knew yourself from yesterday, but you're not that today.
Yeah.
And that's scary. That's scary. And the same with people. They change. And you notice there's something, it's like this is common in relationship. There's something within you that doesn't want the other person to change. That's kind of rude. And again, this points back to the willingness that just lets go. And that's kind of how I approach relationship is, let's see what happens. You know, and if you feel like moving in a different direction, fantastic. I support you. And that really creates an environment of openness and honesty. It's like, oh, it's okay to be honest about this stuff. Yeah, that's great. Because even in relationships, to be honest about what's there doesn't mean it's going to change. Even like if you express an honesty that says, I don't know if I want to be in this relationship, do you see how that's kind of taboo in a lot of relationships? You can't even say that.
Yeah, because it projects fear on the other person.
Exactly. You're not even allowed to be honest. But do you see that form of honesty that says, I don't think I want to be in this relationship, allows for an honest conversation?
Depends on the other side.
Well, the healing for you is to be honest. To be concerned about how they respond, you're in trouble. Because then you'll withhold.
Yeah.
You won't be honest. And there's such a beauty in being honest and letting other people perceive it however they perceive it. Because they're not going to understand you anyway. And we've spoken to this before. People don't hear you.
Yeah.
You could say something loving and they interpret it from fear. You could say something fearful and they interpret it from love. They don't hear you. That's why your ability to be sincere is for you. It's not for other people. It's for the sake of your own sanity. And this is how we imprison ourselves, very simply, is we don't allow ourselves to be ourselves.
What about being yourself sometimes may hurt other people?
It seems like that, but it's impossible. And we can see this in our own direct experience. Like, for example, as I'm saying these things, do you see how some people can interpret it as rude? Like what I'm saying isn't nice. You see how it can be interpreted that way?
Mm-hmm.
Especially in big groups, it happens quite often. Because everyone hears different things and you touch pain points.
Yeah, possibly a perception might be a slight arrogance.
Yeah, yeah. You see, and then in a way, they can say, that hurts my feelings. They can say, you're hurting my feelings because of what you're saying.
Yeah.
Is that true? Is it true that I have any power over somebody else's feelings?
Yeah.
You see, feelings, emotions, respond to perception. They respond to how you perceive.
Yeah.
If I make a comment and you perceive it as rejection, then you feel rejection. Does it mean that what I'm saying is rejecting you? No.
Does it not depend on your intention?
Not at all.
Behind the words. I've been thinking a lot recently about the 3 filters before you communicate. Is it true, is
Right.
it necessary, and is it kind? So somebody's perception, I mean, it might be skewed, but it can surely depends on the person's intention behind
Yes.
what they're saying.
But those rules are for you, not for others. You see, those rules, in a way, are you being kind to yourself, right? By not letting anything move through you that isn't one of those 3 things. How other people respond to it is totally up to them. Totally up to them. And if we're not careful, what happens is we get trapped in this game of trying to be kind so that we don't offend other people, which only puts you back in that game of denying your own sincerity. You see, and this is a conditioning that we've just grown up in because of the misunderstanding of being human. We've been taught that you are responsible for other people's emotions. You've been taught unknowingly when your parents say, you are pissing me off. You made me feel this way. Do you see how that's impossible? That's something that I remember growing up as a kid, is somehow being blamed for somebody else's emotional instability.
No, but that's 99% of the case.
It's 100% of the case.
And
It
now
is.
children feel responsibility for their
Exactly.
parents' separation and divorce.
Exactly.
And they do.
And you see, it's all insane.
Yeah.
Innocently so.
It's everything. Children,
Yep.
parents, couples, friends, we will always blame
Yeah.
by other people, like what we said or what we did caused their pain or caused.
Yeah. And it's absolutely impossible. Because emotions, they're not responding to anything on the outside. They're only responding to your interpretation. To the degree that somebody could punch you in the face and your emotional response to that is your interpretation to what happened.
Yeah, but it hurt.
It does, but it doesn't need an emotional response.
But is it not a reflex to cry when you're hurt?
It's not a reflex to suffer.
But the pain continues.
Right, but pain and suffering is very different.
One is physical pain, one is.
It's like if you hit your hand with a hammer, it hurts. If you think you're an idiot, it hurts for a week.
Yeah.
Right? Because psychologically, you tell this story of I'm not enough. That's the real issue of pain. The pain of touching a stove or these things aren't that big of a deal.
So do you agree that when I heard the other spiritual talk about that we should not let our mind to control ourselves, because except those emotions are from the mind, from the monkey mind.
Yeah.
And actually they are the one, the emotions, the mind, the one that controlling us, but it should be the other way around. We should have a separation from the mind.
In understanding of what's actually happening. It's like through one's investigation of what's real, you start to see, in my experience, how insane I am. insane in the way of believing the content in my mind, believing the interpretations that are impossible, to the point where I literally cannot trust the mind. Anything it comes up with, I don't trust it. That's the perceived separation. That's the understanding.
Yeah, that's how I
Yeah.
awaken.
In the way that I have no faith in trust in mental content. And in that, so when things happen, the reaction isn't to follow the mind. The opportunity is to be still. What's really happening? And it's funny because
And that's how we fight against the fear, you know? To get rid of the fear. That's pretty
we try and get rid of the fear in the mind,
yeah,
and it
exactly.
doesn't work. You can't put out fire with more fire. You can't get rid of thought with more thought. That's why stillness is such a powerful tool. Like, for example, the other day I was out walking and 20 euro fell out of my pocket somewhere. Don't know where. And as soon as I realized it, I felt the momentary sting, right? The momentary sting. And then that went to, it must be somebody's birthday today. You see, it's a shift of perspective, right? Do you see how that simple thing of money falling out of your pocket, it doesn't mean anything.
I once found a 250 euro note on my birthday.
No.
No. 250 euros when I was 14 years old.
It's amazing.
What did you do with it? What did you do with it?
My mom was
Enjoyed it.
like, oh, now you can pay me back for the stuff on the show. I took it out of my hand. I got to keep a little bit.
But you see,
Crazy.
our emotions are responding to meanings.
So how do we, because this type of like, the thought that you had just now, it
Yeah.
comes naturally.
Yeah.
Like many people, they have this natural.
Well, it didn't used to.
So how do we do that? I understand that.
If there's any how to this, it's simply a willingness. It's a willingness that says, I'm willing to see that. I'm willing to not trust the mind. I'm willing to see the truth. And this is difficult for the egoic mind because it wants something more than that. It wants 15 steps. It wants to take control over it. But the truth doesn't move like that. You can just open to it. It's almost like a deep humility that says, yes, I see that I'm insane. And then you see how that humility lets go of the world a little bit? It's like, okay, it's not you. It's me. Not as a blame, but as an acknowledgement. And it's that willingness that opens you up to see these things. It's like, because you could read books all day long about this stuff and even try and memorize it, but it's not going to save you.
I'm just thinking about the puddle and everything. When I had very, 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 very little money and I was travelling, I gave the equivalent of £100 by accident in China at a bus stop. It was like 4 o'clock in the morning. We stopped to have a wee, and I gave the cleaner the equivalent of 100. And I got on the bus and I went, that's like, that's, you're looking at like a month's accommodation for that
Yeah.
amount of money. And then I was like, he's a cleaner. He's like probably, packed his bags and
Yeah.
off he's gone. But if I did that now,
Yeah.
I'm working,
Yeah.
I think I would be affected. So what is that about? It must have been because during that time I was free.
Yeah.
I had no money,
Yeah.
very little money,
Yeah.
but I was free. And now
Yep.
I am a prisoner.
Yep.
So €100, if £100,
Yes.
if I gave it away, I'd be like, oh my God,
Yes.
when I didn't have enough,
Yeah.
but when I have a little bit more, I mean,
Yeah.
it's okay.
You see,
But I think my mind then
exactly, yeah.
was, along a nice spiritual path.
Yeah, that's why you can have the same circumstance, but one person experiences heaven and another person experiences hell.
Yeah.
Yeah. But in that moment of freedom, you said you had less.
Yeah.
Right? That's always indicative of freedom. You have less.
Exactly.
And the more you think you have, you become a prisoner.
Yeah.
Because now you have to hold on to those things. That's what's meant by the scripture. It's harder for a rich man to enter heaven than a camel to pass through the eye of a needle. Because a rich man, which is the adult, has lots of stuff. And in order to enter the kingdom of heaven, you have to let go of all of your stuff. And the illustration you might have heard me mention is heaven is a place that has a no backpack policy. And as adults, we have backpacks full of things. Yeah. Not just possessions, but what we think, right? All of our opinions and beliefs and what we think is right and wrong. You can't bring any of that with you. And people don't want to put that backpack down.
Which helped me grieve the death of my mum, because by me moving on enabled her backpack to be emptied more.
Yeah.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah. Which is similarly what's happening for you as you're holding space for all of that.
But it's very funny. For me, it's something, that's very interesting. Because I will be really exactly opposite. If I don't have much anyway, I'm very happy just to give because I don't have much. No, sorry.
Yeah.
When I don't have much, I didn't, because I worry about the next month.
Yeah.
So I feel bad. Like,
Yeah.
I lost that. But if I am earning money, I say, it's okay, I can earn again.
Yeah. But you still have a lot you're wanting.
Still want to have, okay.
Yeah, the wanting is to have. Those are things in your backpack. It's like, even if you don't have a lot of things, if you want a lot of things, then you have a lot of things in your backpack.
That is the fear too,
Yeah,
losing them.
exactly. You don't even have them and you already fear their loss.
Just this practical acceptance of things. I lost money once. I think everybody has, haven't they? I forgot to take it out of the
The
cash
ATM
point
machine,
ATM. So I put my
Yeah.
card in, ordered the money, took my card off and walked off. Got to Pinduoduo to pay my bill and I was like, I didn't take the money. So I ran back to the cash point
It's gone.
and it was gone. And I was like, oh, that was such a stupid thing to do. And then I was like, okay, but it's done and there's nothing I can do about it.
Yeah.
So I'm going to let it go. And so for a couple of minutes I was fine, and then my mind's back again. That was a really stupid
Yeah.
thing to do.
Beating myself.
Yeah.
And it's how to do that, because you can consciously
Yeah.
think, I need to let that go because there isn't anything I can do about it, and
Yeah.
your mind keeps coming back going, you should have been paying more attention.
Yeah.
And think of what you could have spent that money on.
Yeah.
We're so hard on ourselves.
And
aren't we?
yeah, and it's that, how do you deal with that, because it keeps coming back.
How would you deal with it in a relationship?
Exactly, that's what I'm thinking. So for
Yeah.
example, when Sylvia, my partner, when she gets a parking ticket,
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, don't worry about it. Like, it's a mistake. But I do it.
Yeah,
A week of irritation with myself.
that's
So
interesting.
I often think
Much
to
more
myself,
hard
how
on
would you
ourselves.
be to the people that you love?
Yep.
You'd be like, you made a mistake.
Yeah, and I am much easier.
Yeah. I wonder why it's so much more difficult.
Yeah.
Because I think that's almost universal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Acceptance of who we are and
Yeah, it's sort of, it destroys your idea of me as a responsible person who remembers to take the money out of the cash point, doesn't it? Whereas if it's somebody else, that's okay, but it's your idea of you, I guess, is threatening, isn't it?
Yep.
So,
Yeah. It's more difficult because there's a more deeply rooted self-identification, a deeper belief in that character. And the elements of blame and guilt, those are all tools to protect that character. Like, in the way, imagine the relationship dynamic where another person is telling you those things. Oh, you're such an idiot, and da 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 da. Do you see that space inside of you that's unconcerned with their comments because it's silly?
then you'd feel indignant, wouldn't you? Everyone can make mistakes.
Well, it's just, I mean, imagine somebody's coming at you in that way, and you just sit there and listen, but you love them. Because you see that their frustration isn't really about you. It's not about what you did or didn't do. It's about something deeper. Right? And so in that place of understanding, when they're not really mad at you, there's something else going on. You listen to their insult because you know it's not personal.
I would like to be at the stage where I could think that. To be able to think, okay, this is
Well,
something to do with
if
me.
that's true, you'll get practice.
Yes.
You'll get lots of practice, which means you'll manifest circumstances where it looks like people are mad at you. Because you're asking to see through it. And so it has to show up for your own benefit. You don't experience anything in this life that you didn't first ask for. It's impossible. You're the creator of everything.
Well, so you can honestly think to yourself that you created the perceived by others hideous abuse that you experienced as a child,
Yeah.
that had something to do with you.
I know that I created it for the sake of healing.
For the sake of future healing.
Not future, not past, eternal.
Okay.
For healing itself, not linear time or past or past or future, just the whole.
Can I understand in a way, like, that means we take full responsibility of whatever happened to us?
Total experiential accountability. That whatever I experience is my creation.
Yes. When I say this, people think I'm crazy.
Don't say it. It's not necessary to say it because no one will understand you. Yeah, I don't talk like this outside of satsang.
No.
I just smile and love on people.
When we get out of the other world.
But let's break this down. The understanding of how you're creating everything that you're experiencing. Like, for example, the loss of money example. Do you see how, to break it down very simply, what happened was a piece of paper fell out of my pocket? Do you see how that's like nothing happened actually? As you break it down a little bit, it's like, oh, well, actually. And all of the value of the money, who decides the value? I do. So I create the value.
If you go to a shop, they'll tell you what the value is, even if you've decided a different amount.
But I decide what that means. If somebody says this costs 100 euros, I decide if that's too much or not enough.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you see beyond that, the 100 euros is nothing?
Mm-hmm.
I decide.
Yeah.
I create. And what I'm pointing to is that every experience is blank. It's empty of any meaning whatsoever. Like a tree falls down onto a newly grown garden. Do you see how in a real way nothing happened? Life being life.
Mm-hmm.
See how in this very moment right now, see how it's actually blank? And what you experience on top of that blankness is what you decide it means. All the people in this room, you look at them and you create an image of them. And you experience your image. What are they beyond your image? Blank. Which is also to say the divine. All the things that I thought happened to me didn't actually happen to me. I made it all up.
Whoa.
I would never say that to another person though, because then I would be making that up too.
So let's say your partner wakes up one morning and starts to go through some kind of depression.
Yeah.
And starts to behave in a very negative way to you.
Yeah. You're making all this up, by the way.
Yeah. Yes. Even though your partner is.
Well, no, but you see, when you say, and they start being negative to you,
Right.
that doesn't actually happen.
Ah, but that's the bit I've got the issue with.
Exactly.
And
'Cause
I
you-
still can't get my
yeah.
head around that.
Yeah, you think that's happening outside of you. And the way for you to control that is to change the other person. And that's not working.
But I still can't see that. I can't see that. She wakes up, comes through, starts shouting at you, starts doing blah, 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 blah. You are able to go, okay, I'm the creator of this.
No.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, it's not a dialogue.
simplistic,
Yes,
is that?
well, it's not a. I would say it's simpler than that.
Oh, okay.
There's no dialogue about it.
Okay.
It's just like in the way of if I see it clearly, then I see it clearly. If I don't, I don't. And if I don't see it clearly, I experience pain. And the pain tells me I'm not seeing it clearly. And so I don't try and avoid the pain.
So by seeing it clearly, you're not using the mind.
Yeah, there's not much commentary about it.
No.
There's, if anything, there's a holding space. There's an allowing it. Because notice this, if you saw that it wasn't personal, you would allow it.
Mm.
So in that situation, instead of thinking, oh, my partner was being at that moment,
Yeah.
actually I can think that, oh, my partner actually is having a hard time.
Yeah.
So if I draw a line like this, I won't be affected. Something like that.
No, you will be affected because most likely there's a form of defense where you're trying to protect yourself. And if you're trying to protect yourself, that's a form of separation. What are you protecting yourself from? Your own creation? If you see it's your own creation, there's nothing to protect yourself from. But I understand the difficulty in seeing this, but at the same time,
It's a long way down.
it's so obvious, and you hear what I'm saying and then go home and then watch. It's like you watch things happen and you say, what's really happening?
That my partner is having a bad time, like not happy with.
Right. But is that even really happening? When you say my partner, is that real?
Ownership again.
Yeah.
I was wondering if that happens continually, if you get to the point where you go, we don't have to be in a relationship. Yes.
Well, in one way, what you'll see is that the relationship you're in isn't even real. It's just play. If a relationship is serious, then you definitely think you're in a relationship. You think you're doing something. Which is all just subtle movements in the mind to hold on to your character. And again, this is all predicated on, I don't want to lose my character. And if you can't find a willingness to lose your character, you won't see this, because that character doesn't want to see this.
This is deep.
I think that people should have a responsibility for their own actions.
And how's that going?
So, for example, to go to work, so true.
I started to take this word from you a lot.
Yeah.
It's so good.
I don't know, say for example, you go to work or something like that, and so maybe someone who you think you should have a professional relationship with
Yeah.
does something that you perceive as completely unfair.
Yeah.
I feel that it's their responsibility to not be unfair. Like my is when I feel that somebody is being unfair.
Right.
But that's my perception of.
Exactly.
of
So you
what
you
it
want
is.
them to be responsible for your projection.
Not my projection, but
You want them to save you from your projection. That's why I asked, how's it going?
I think morals have something to do with my thoughts.
Yeah.
My understanding of what a moral is.
Yeah. And for an ego structure, that can be helpful.
Yeah, this is my,
But
yeah.
at some point, the truth of what you are wants to break through the ego structure.
Yeah. So how do you do that?
It's happening right now.
Yeah, that's true. Otherwise, I wouldn't be.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And see the simplicity in that right there.
Yeah.
The sincerity says, I'm willing to see, and you find yourself here in Zazzle.
Yeah. Yeah, both of us said at lunchtime today, are you going? You know, because we're both very busy at the moment, and we both said we need that stillness.
Yeah.
We need that, you know, so I suppose this is all part of it, isn't it?
See,
Yeah.
and that's what I'm pointing to as this divine unfolding, where you're going to get exactly what you need, whether you like it or not. It can't be any other way.
Yeah.
It's like your play of awakening to these things is already destined. So stop trying.
Like the sliding doors effect.
How so?
Have you not?
No.
Yeah, so you'll have to watch it then. It's a film from years ago, but you're probably too young. The sliding doors. No, you know what I mean, when a film is popular at a certain time.
Yeah. You see, just that simple thought about these, as you're here, your mind's saying, how do I get it? How do I do it? Not seeing that it's already happening.
if you feel that people are behaving in a way that you don't like. So say I'm trying to put things through filters, saying is it true, is it necessary, is it kind, and that's my responsibility. And said, yeah, that's for you.
Yeah.
Not always successfully, but I try. What if somebody else doesn't do that and says something that I consider to be untrue, unnecessary, and unkind?
Then you're still saying it. Let me put it this way. Everything you hear anybody say is also your creation. If somebody says something unkind, that's you.
How so?
Yeah.
You see how a storm can come and you say the storm's being unkind. Is it really that? No. The invitation in that practice at its root is to see that all is that. All is loving. All is kind. It's like the foundation that we talked about, how it's blank. Do you see how that's symbolic of silence? That's symbolic of stillness. That's symbolic of unconditional love, right? In stillness, in a blank canvas, there's no judgment. Everything is allowed. If you see anything other than that, that's your creation. In such a way that the only thing anybody ever says to you is, I love you. It's the only thing ever said. Maybe I love you and I'm scared, but nonetheless, I love you.
If that situation happened, if someone says something unkind, should I just perceive it like, oh, okay, it is what it is. It's part of it.
It's not a how should I perceive it. It's being open to see how you perceive it.
Okay.
Just be willing to see how you see, rather than blaming something for what you see.
But that is enough. It's the same skill that we have to separate us from the mind. That's how we observe
Which is
our mind.
just your own willingness, in such a way that when you leave here, at some moments you'll be able to question, and other moments you won't. Right? And none of that will be up to you.
So you basically watch your reaction to the situation, and that's how you're learning.
Yeah, it's like when you come to this space here in satsang, you gain a clarity about what's really there. It's like, holy shit, none of this is true. All this noise. You see what's actually here, and you see that this is actually here all the time. The peace, love, everything I crave is actually always here. I just don't see it. And so then you go out and you see what you put on top. You don't try and change what you put on top. Just see. See that I'm creating that. See that I'm blaming. See that I'm turning things into something that they're not. And actually, that's the healing. Is to see, because the healing recognizes that it's not what I thought it was. You don't change it. You see, you don't take what I'm saying and go and create love. You open to what I'm saying and see the love that's always been there. And so it's not an issue of what should I do in this situation or this situation, or what should I think, or how should I respond? None of that. It's just, what do I think I see right now?
So it's like to be aware of our own emotion.
Yeah, it's a next level of self-awareness
Yes.
beyond the traditional idea of self-awareness.
Mm.
To be aware that you are the one, that you create everything. And do you notice that if something in you catches that, you come to stillness. It's like, whoa. And see, it's that stillness that's the teacher. And you don't even do anything with that stillness. You just recognize, whoa, I see that. That's the only thing life's asking you to do, is see that. Life's not saying do something about it. Life's not saying change something. See.
But the concept of you have created the situation is not the kind of like more concrete way of looking upon creating a situation, if you see what I mean.
No, it's not.
Because then that goes back to the ego and to blame and to, so
Yeah.
say for example, something happened to me as a young child, then years and years later when I went for counselling, they said, this has nothing to do with you, you were a child.
Yeah.
It was the adult
Yeah.
who created that situation.
Yeah.
But when you're saying this, then I'm going, but I didn't create that situation, I was 6 years old.
Yeah.
So it's not a concrete way of,
Yeah.
it's a spiritual depth to
Yeah.
creating a
See,
situation.
that surface level
Yes.
in the counseling, do you see how that's ultimately pointing to what I'm saying? Essentially, it's saying what you think happened didn't happen. You thought it was about you.
Right.
That was your pain,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And the surface level is saying it's not about that, it's this. It takes it off of you and kind of puts it on somebody else.
Right.
So you feel better now,
Yes.
but you're still not free because there's blame.
But not blame of myself.
Exactly. That's why it's helpful,
Yes.
but it's not liberating.
But how do you convince someone that has something happen bad?
You don't.
6 years old, and then actually it's
You don't.
your own creation when you're 6 years old.
Yeah, you don't say that, ever.
So how
I'll
does
tell
that
you,
work?
if you see this, your interaction with any person going through anything is to love them.
Yeah.
It's not to make them see this. It's a very compassionate understanding that they're confused right now and they're taking this personally. And the last thing you would say is it's not personal. You'd love on them. It's the opportunity of being human, for this love to express itself through you into the world.
But when I'm counselling children, one of the first things that I ever say to them, depending on obviously the scenario, but one of the main things I say is it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Because I don't want them to feel responsible for whatever is happening to them in their lives. So that's why I find this concept quite difficult.
Well, again,
But
what I'm sharing
just
with you,
thinking, aren't I?
it's not for them.
No. Of course not. Not
Yeah.
for the child's mind.
Some children understand this.
Yeah. If they're-
It's like I understood it initially, but then through the play of conditioning, I became convinced that I was a victim. Because that's what everybody else was telling me. Because I thought, well, I must be wrong. Because this wasn't a big deal.
Okay.
But it became a big deal because of the
people's-
environment.
Yeah. Other people's perception.
Right, but the thing is I wanted something from those other people, so I denied my own sincerity in order to get their approval, which means I pretended to be a victim.
Because you wanted
Their approval, their love.
Their love.
Yeah. and it ultimately failed, which is very important to see.
Yeah.
You see, this discovery, now look at how this has unfolded in your life. It's like here you are discovering some pretty profound shit. Think about all of the things that had to happen in order for you to be here right now, seeing a new depth of love. Do you see how, in a way, it wasn't even your choice to be here? It wasn't even your choice to see these things. You didn't do it. It's happening. Beyond your own control. Beyond your own personal will. Like in a very spontaneous way, if you watch a garden, some flowers bloom and some do not. Do you see how it's not up to the flower? The flower doesn't decide to bloom or not bloom. It's almost created by the environment, which is almost saying it's created by the universe. Right? Because that environment expands, and then there's the ultimate environment. Your discovery of these things has nothing to do with you. And that's partly the dilemma, is you think you're doing it, so you try and do it. Rather than seeing that it's not up to you and you bow to it. You surrender to it. You acknowledge that this is happening. And that's when you get out of the way. But often what happens is the ego sees that it's happening and then wants to take hold of it. Because it sees this and it's like, okay, this is profound, but don't get out of control. Don't go too deep. As if it's up to you.
Yeah.
And so if anything, the ego that hijacks it kind of delays the process in its trying. Even the play of awakening isn't personal. Much like the way that people are awake or not awake, it's not up to them. And notice how we think it's up to them? We think that what people say and do, they do it of their own personal will. They do not. There goes responsibility.
Okay.
But just see if you can see that.
No, that's mindfuck.
Yeah, it is. See, the human being thinks they're doing something, and God is doing everything.
What do you mean when you use the word God? Or is that too deep a question?
Well, it is too deep because anything I say, it's not that.
Yes.
But I like using the word because it stirs things inside the being. Here we get to see what comes up. But what's pointed to in the use of that word that which organizes the 10,000 things in the forest. Beyond the mind's understanding.
Yeah, that's good.
I mean, to understand there are galaxies upon galaxies, universes upon universes, and all of it's rotating in a dance, right? That's in harmony. All of it's interconnected. And there's a force that ties all of that together. That's God. And there's nothing outside of that. It's all that. And this is what I mean, discovering the truth of what you are. You will see that you are that. You'll quickly relax. And that's why, like, the character of me, and the same for the character of everyone else, I see that this character doesn't do anything. It tells stories about itself. But it doesn't do anything in the world. Like, for example, and this is the play of destiny. It's already done, man. It's already decided. Like, for example, you drive somewhere and you get delayed and you show up late. Do you see how you tell a story about yourself doing that? But you didn't really do that. That the story you tell didn't really happen.
That actually you were not late.
Ex-
That's what you're trying to say.
Well, yeah.
Or you didn't get stuck behind a bin lorry.
No, you didn't get stuck at all. Because here's the thing. The person commenting that says, I got stuck, that person doesn't even exist. That person did not get stuck. The person wasn't even there. You just imagined it and believed it into existence.
That is very deep.
Yeah, you tell stories. You tell stories about stories. And none of it's actually happening. And what I'm pointing to is to drop all of that and to let it go. You'll be amazed at how life just takes care of you. In the way that it has your whole life already. You notice this your whole life? Nothing has gone how you thought it was going to go. You thought you were doing something and you look back, wow, I didn't do shit. Life did it. Yeah. And the same anxiety you had yesterday of trying to make it go a certain way, in which it didn't, you're still with this anxiety going into tomorrow, trying to make it do something, and it's going to work just as well as it did yesterday. I'm pointing to an epic self-forgiveness. Because you're beating yourself up for not being able to do something that's impossible. You're saying, I should be able to do this. I should be able to do this. You're not even doing that. You can't do that. It's not a real thing. That's why there's instant forgiveness in the truth, because what you think happened didn't really happen. The things that you're beating yourself up for didn't really happen.
Did they not happen?
You're beating yourself up for being late.
Yes.
Do you see that you're beating yourself up because you give that meaning?
Yes.
That meaning didn't happen. You say, this means I'm less than. That's not true. This means I'm unlovable. This means I'm going to lose something. That's not true.
So all four of us were stuck behind the dustbin van.
Right?
We all turned up at 9:45.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, Tiger. Is it okay if we come in?
At 10?
Yes.
I probably wouldn't be here.
Okay, 9:30.
I'd be out drinking a beer.
Yeah, 9:30.
Yeah.
You sat around
Yeah.
for an hour and a half.
I have no concern if anyone shows up.
But then we turn up at 9:30
Yeah.
or more.
Normal in the way you might come in or you might not. I don't know. We'll find out. There's not a right or
But
wrong.
then our first,
There's not a.
we would be apologetic.
You can be. There's no requirement.
Yeah, it's the pressure we put on ourselves.
Exactly.
isn't it?
Yeah. See, I'm free to interpret it however I interpret it.
Yeah.
And I'm going to interpret it in a way that's preferably in alignment with the truth. That feels much better.
Yeah.
You see how if I'm irritated in any way, I want something from you?
Yeah.
Exactly.
That you want us to arrive on time, for example. Like perfectly.
From a practical standpoint, wonderful. Does it matter? No.
Doesn't actually.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
You're always on time to satsang.
It seems like it. That's
In my experience.
yeah. Actually, there was a time, I don't think you were there, where I was like, what was it, 15 minutes late?
Yeah.
Yeah, I missed my train. I had to take an Uber.
But nobody, we just all sat
Yeah.
there calmly. Nobody had a...
Did you see that? Now imagine me freaking out on my way there. Oh, God, I'm disappointing everyone, and they're going to be so pissed, and they're not going to take me serious.
But you didn't,
No,
because it happened.
this is what's happening.
Yeah.
I'm not even the one that's being late. Life is being what it is.
But if someone else caused your lateness, say your partner, you'd still have the same.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Again, you can't get it wrong.
Predict.
Yeah, and I would invite a liberation in yourself to let happen whatever happens.
Yeah.
But you must make an effort to be on time. In order to be on time all those times. And not just think I feel like
See,
lying down on the sofa.
the thing is you say you must make an effort. That's the part that I would take question in. Like, is it really me taking the effort, or is the play of taking an effort just happening? Like, am I deciding to make an effort? No. It's what's happening, right? It's like waking up in the morning. I wake up when I wake up. That's what happens. And so it's like, for some reason, this past week and a half or 2 weeks, I've been super inspired and busy and creative, and I've been waking up at like 6 o'clock in the morning and just going straight to work. Not really deciding, oh, I'm gonna do this. I'm the worst guy to decide what time I'm getting up. But when I need to be up, I'm up.
And have you ever had an institutional job?
Yeah. Terrible employee.
So that wouldn't have suited your...
Well, it suited me in the time.
At that time.
Yeah, it was great at the time, and it was a perfect teacher to move away from that. Yeah.
It was for me.
Because, I got to see firsthand that this is not for me.
Yeah.
Same with school. I dropped out of school. I was like, actually, this isn't for me. And that was probably like one of the first real honest decisions that I made in my life. Because everybody around me was like, no, you have to do this and this and this. I'm like, this is stupid. You see, you make a choice and you think you made that choice, not realizing that choices are like ripples. They stretch back.
Mm-hmm.
Not even back in you, but back in everything. It's like you make a choice in the next 5 minutes that's tied to your mother's best friend on such and such a day when you were all sitting around watching TV and you saw a commercial. And that influenced you on doing this. It's like, you see this, it's not autonomous. You're tied into everything. Same with people's actions. Same with people's violence. The violence of one man is not the violence of one man. It's the violence of everyone. And so when I see somebody being violent, that's my violence. Hence, treat others how you want to be treated, because they are you. This really points to the principle of it's all one. And not just as a spiritual concept, but like in a real way. It's all one. And you're that one. And you can see how in the mind we believe that there's 10,000 things. And so, in conclusion, I invite you to recognize I want to say a humble devotion that sees that you're not doing any of this. And sort of open to seeing that more deeply. That in fact everything is already done. And in that is an invitation to trust it. And then see what happens. Then maybe I'll see you next week. Thanks, guys.